target or vice president this year. And we're going to start the program this morning. We have some special guests with us this morning. I would like to first introduce our illustrious person here and one of our own members, the Oklahoma section manager, Mr. Mark Klein, N5AUS.
Thank you. Yes, and you're all tired of listening to me. Oh, look at that crowd. 3 applauses. I'm so impressed. The 3 guys, a lot. Yeah, a lot. I appreciate it. Maybe it'll encourage you to go on. I get it. Good to see all you here in Zoom and YouTube land. Thank you all for showing up. I am section manager. You have dealt with me for about either 35 years or 6 months, depending on your attitude. I've been here. I've been here 35 years in the ham business and 6 months here as a section manager. And thanks to old Kevin, who's on the Zoom call, who passed the sword to me. So I appreciate that. Not every day, but I appreciate that most days. But the good news is I get to see most of you folks and talk to all of you guys, fine folks. We have with us today our esteemed West Gulf. Let's see, West NATO, West Sharkland.
You're going to call it West NATO. It could get pretty close to that.
West, yeah, something like that. He's got other names they're thinking about calling it, but the West Gulf Division Director from Austin, Texas. As you saw,
no, I had to pay him a lot of money to do that.
Yes. Okay, wait, I got to read. Hold on, what you said. Okay, there it is. He's, as I said in the newsletter, he's an engineer and a lawyer from some school south of Dallas. I don't remember what that's one's called. Little tiny school, but he's actually from Austin. He came up to say hi to us. So do we have a mic on him? Yep, we got him good. Come on up, John, and join the crowd. And we will start off today's ARRL session.
What do you need is to stand, Mark, for the camera. Okay, come on.
Good.
You're not going to get out of this either.
Okay.
Everything I say you like is my idea. Everything I say that's wrong, it's his. And let me tell you that there are 71 section managers in the United States. For those of you who are new members of the league, you've got 2 divisions of control within the league. You've got the board of directors is responsible for financing, policy, and the future. There are 15 directors elected by different states. The West Gulf consists of Oklahoma and Texas, and Oklahoma didn't really want Texas, but you got stuck with us. But below that, the people who are responsible for the day-to-day operation are the section managers. The West Gulf has 4. Oklahoma, because of its size and the number of members, has 1. Him. You can get rid of him, by the way. We can talk about that when he leaves the room.
Hey.
And you weren't supposed to be listening. And Texas has 3, but there are 71 in the United States. I will tell you that you're lucky to have Mark as your section emergency coordinator and this gentleman as your section manager. They're 2 of the best in the country. And that's saying a lot. Now, I was really impressed with the club's standards until I realized that you were going to let Kevin Odell into this meeting.
He paid extra.
Yeah, Kevin always does. And by the way, Kevin did an excellent job when he was section manager. You're lucky to have both of them. Did you want to go into any more detail on how the league is structured? Because we can cover that at another meeting.
Yeah, we can probably cover that in a detailed meeting.
Okay.
If they got questions, we're here Zoom. We're here for Elmer night every Tuesday night, so that we can cover that.
The reason we brought that out is that how this league is structured and how it works is extremely complicated, far more complicated than we know. And the issue is, what does my $49 go for? And we can get into that into another meeting because we'll go into great detail on it. Speaking of the board, there's going to be a board meeting in a week. The board of the directors meets twice a year, once in January, once in July. The January meeting is usually the one that deals with more important issues. We've got a lot of things to deal with at this meeting. And I'm not talking loud enough. You're cupping your. I didn't bring my hair down, so you're fine. You can sit up here. No. That's okay. No one else wants to be close to Mark or me. But there have been In 2016, the chief executive officer, Dave Sumner, retired. And since then, we've been trying to move the league forward into a new direction. We've got a new chief executive officer, Dave Minster, who is doing his best to put up with the board and get the board going in a new direction to provide more benefits for the members. And so you'll see changes as we go along. Some will be good, some won't be as good as you want, because we're rebuilding the organization. We've got an endowment of $37 million that comes from donations like everyone in this room, or from some outside groups. That money is used as a reserve to fund programs that the league wants to develop. You'll see in the minutes the formation of what's called an investment management committee, because up until this last year, the league has never paid attention to its investment policies. Now, why is that important to any of us in this room? Because if we don't invest that money and do not manage it so that it increases, there won't be any reserves for the future. And we'll talk about why the reserves are important in a minute. But Fred Hopengarten, who's the director for the New England division, is the one that recommended that we change the investment policy and we start hiring outside managers. How many people manage the money for the league up until now? You've got the answer? Tell them what it is. The treasurer was responsible for managing all the money, investing it. You can't count on one person being that bright all the time. Now, Rick Neiswander, who has been doing this, done an excellent job, but Rick's going to retire. So how often can you find someone with the background that Rick has? So the decision was that we're going to have outside managers to manage that money. The importance of that is that it will be able to back up as a reserve. Some years for the league are good and bad. Each one of you that's a member writes a check every year for your membership. How much of the operating cost does that membership pay? You want to guess again?
12%.
You were raising your hand.
47%.
He cheated. He listened to me before. So if we're about a $15 million a year budget, give or take, the dues pay for 47% of the operating cost. The rest of that money comes from either digital advertising in the magazines, digital advertising, the sale of books. And by the way, those books are important. Besides using the books to enhance amateur radio, to provide training, to bring new people in, we actually make a small profit of this. We're not getting rich, but all of that helps pay for what the league does to maintain amateur radio. But what we're seeing across the country is that advertising in magazines is declining. How many of you have magazines for a trade organization and they keep getting thinner? They keep getting thinner because the ads are going out. We have the same issue. Answer is digital advertising, right? No. Digital advertising is, for no reasons that aren't clear to everybody, at least within our group, is also declining. Book sales shift. This year, one book is popular. Next year, another book is popular. So we're constantly trying to readjust and ensure that we have a sufficient stream of money coming in to pay for all our costs. So there are years in which we do not cover or bring in enough money to cover those costs. So we're going into a loss situation. We need to have the reserves to cover that until we get back up. Your primary sources of money for the league are the memberships, the ads, digital and print, your books, and the magic one, donations. In any given year, we can count on roughly $1 million in donations from just everybody in the room. $1, $10, $100. If you think your donation's not important, it is. Because if you cut out the individual donations, we're $1 million short every year just to start with. And we can't do that forever. So everyone who gives any amount of money to the league at all is seeing to it the amateur radio stays alive and the league stays alive. So thank you for, if you've made donations and marked your $10,000 donations due at the end of the meeting.
You'll take cash, right?
Cash, and if the serial numbers are consecutive, we need to talk.
Mary said she'd print me some more.
Yeah, okay. Actually, Mary would. There are a number of things coming up at this board meeting that will affect where the league goes in the future. As I said, the league meets twice a year right now. There is a proposal that we meet 4 times a year. I will not go into why I think someone's proposing we meet 4 times a year, but it doubles our operating cost. And as much as I like seeing everyone, twice a year, 4 times a year gets a little old, it interferes with what, it will interfere with what staff does. It will interfere with the productivity. Again, that's my view. There are those on the board who thinks meeting 4 times a year will be great. It will enhance efficiency. We'll see how it comes out. The budget gets approved every January. Does anyone know what a budget is?
No, we're from Oklahoma. We don't do those.
Don't do it in Texas either, trust me. It's a wish list, really. You propose what you think your expenses are going to be, your income is, and this is what we're going to spend for this year based on our estimate of income coming in. It's a wish list, folks, because you can't guarantee it's going to work. We were looking at, in the recent past, suffering $1 million+ loss. Didn't happen. We managed to cover that and remain, it's almost not the right word, but to balance out the books. Because of what's happening, because of COVID, the loss of advertising, because people have cut off advertising, not because they don't like us, it's just across the country, people reduce advertising. We may be looking at a greater loss this year, but we can, when you see this come out in the minutes and the budget that's published, again, because we have the reserves and we're focusing on improving those in the future, we're going to be fine. But you will see an increased push for more donations just to help us meet that requirement. And I'm going to come back. I want to talk about the EC committee when we get to the end. You're going to receive from both he and I an email within about 48 hours to participate in a survey. How many of you participate in a field day? The rules changed for the last couple of years, right? The survey is going out to ask the membership, what do you think about those rule changes? Should we keep them, assuming COVID's going away, or should we retain them? So it's going out to all the membership. Is important because the Programs and Services Committee is trying to determine whether or not we keep the rules or change them. And when I'm talking about program services, there are 3 committees that operate the league. Programs and Services, which does contesting, DXing, handles all exam, the VECs, everything except emergency communications and support for the clubs. Prior to July of this year, PSC did it all. If you went to a PSC meeting, and the people on the committee, by the way, work very hard. Mike Ritz is the chairman out of Northwest Division. There's only so many minutes in a meeting. If you went to a 2-hour meeting, even though Mike did his best to cover everything, you'd end up with 5 to 15 minutes to focused on support for clubs and emergency communications, areas and NTS. Not enough time to do it. So in order to bring more support for the clubs, to bring support back to areas and NTS, which has been lacking for decades, we created a committee with a long name called Emergency Communications, because it's focused on that, and Field Services Committee. What it means is that committee is now responsible for providing support for the clubs, developing new programs for the clubs, because there's been a lack of support for the clubs over the last decade, and helping section managers, section emergency coordinators, NTS. That support hasn't been there either. The committee, if you read the minutes of the actual motion that created it, it's 2.5 pages long because it has to cover so much. That level of support hasn't existed for the clubs and field service, section managers, areas and NTS probably for 20 years. And it shows in the field. If every one of you who's an officer of a club, how much new things have you gotten from the league? How much? Yeah, it kind of got quiet there, didn't you? That's the problem across the country. The backbone of the league sits in this room. If the clubs disappear, amateur radio is gone, folks. And to give you an idea of how little support we had from headquarters for the clubs, we had a gentleman who's no longer with us, who, when we sat down with him to talk about the lack of support for the clubs, looked at another director and me and said, "We don't need to support those clubs. Clubs are old and they're out of date." Go, "Excuse me?" He went, "It's just a bunch of old guys sitting around on Saturday morning, drinking coffee, telling war stories." The other director managed not to hit him. And we said, "Okay, we don't need clubs anymore. What replaces clubs?" Anyone want to guess? Oh, come on. Most of you are sober. You can guess this.
Twitter.
Close. He said social media. We don't need clubs. We'll do everything we need to recruit new members and to operate the league with social media. My response and the other director's response was not printable. What we recommended, or what I persuaded the board to approve at the next board meeting, was the creation of a national club coordinator whose responsibility is to come back to the clubs and go, "What do you need? What do we need to do to help you expand your club, bring in new members, keep the ones you've got, get rid of people like Mark?" That position hasn't been filled yet, but that position also didn't have direct support from any of the committees. That's the reason we created EC-FSC. Yes, and by the way, if you can say that 3 times in a row without being drunk, you get a prize.
No, you're on the committee.
Pardon?
You're on the committee.
I'm one of the founders of the committee. We spent 3 years trying to create this committee to bring support back to clubs and to field service. One of the first steps was to create a position called Director of Emergency Management. Before that, there was a staff person at headquarters, and he was what do they call him? Emergency management something. And David Woolweaver, the former director, and I sat down with him one day and said, "We want to make certain you're getting all the support you need. Are they letting you take CommT classes, CommL classes, Oxcom classes?" Each question we asked got exactly the same response. He backed up in his chair, and he kept backing up until he ran into the wall. And he finally said, "All I'm supposed to do is go to Hamfest." That was the level of support that we had. So in January of 19, when we got control of the board, and that we can go into that in more detail later, we eliminated that position. And we created a position called Director of Emergency Management. That person reports directly to the CEO. That person reports directly to David Minster now. And the first person we hired in that job was Paul Gilbert, who had been the South Texas section manager. For health reasons, Paul had to resign. And we now, after a long search, have replaced him with Josh Johnson out of Arkansas, who's got a real good background in public service and MCOM. Hopefully he works out. Of course, his problem is he has to live in Connecticut. And he may run screaming from there in about 6 months. But in order to get support back into the field, support areas and NTS, and as you know, we exist for 2 reasons. One of those reasons, for the reason amateur radio still exists, is to provide a voluntary, free emergency communication service in the event of emergencies. If we don't have people who know how to do it, or we're not bringing support to you in the field, that's not going to happen. And if we don't do what we're statutorily required to do, we're going to disappear. Someone will go take away our frequencies. So we created that position, and then the effort was to create a committee that would provide support to the CEO, to the new EMD director, and come up with new programs, modify existing programs, find out what you want, not what we want, what you want, what you need, and then see to it it's implemented. And since it was formed, actually came into existence in July, it's still forming, it's still running. The list that we have created, which is input from section managers across the country and from club presidents, depending on which list you look at, is 3 to 5 pages long, small print, by the way. So it's a long list of things that the committee is going to be focused on for doing for the future to bring support to the clubs and to the section manager. You got a comment on that?
No, it's a good list. We all got together in our division and came up with a good list based on the information from clubs in Oklahoma. And the good thing is you're starting to see a little of that stuff work out of headquarters. You know, the ball turns slowly, but it's a snowball coming downhill is what I hope will keeps coming at us with more and more good out of that, and we'll start attacking some of those list items.
And we've hired some new people to provide support at headquarters. Everyone who is involved in field service knows Steve Ewald, but we also hired Mike Walters, who was formerly the section emergency coordinator for Connecticut, and he's running most of the meetings now with the section managers. Am I correct?
Yes, they're doing a monthly meeting and with all of us,
Mhm.
and then with the divisions a little bit more frequently. But yeah, that's working out really nice.
So again, everyone's trying to get the new footing to see what we need to do to support the field. There's a risk to what we've just done, though. You have 15 people in the boardroom, 15 different backgrounds, kind of 15 different interests. The committee I've just talked about that we spent 3 years working to get created, and that reason we created it came from input from the clubs, from section managers, from NTS, and from government agencies. After all that work, after we created it in July, there's a motion on the floor for consideration at the January board meeting. If it passes, it will gut the committee. The committee is charged with creating, modifying, advising on programs. The same thing that PSC, the Programs and Services Committee, does. There are those who wish to eliminate the committee's ability to innovate, create, or modify anything. And we don't know if they've got enough votes to do it. But think about it. We spent 3 years creating a committee to support clubs, and there's now a motion to kill the committee. Yes.
Why would they do that? What would be the point of them doing that? It sounds to me like that's like step backwards and not forwards.
It's a step backwards.
Why would they do that?
League politics.
Say again.
League politics.
I'll accept that. That's about the politest
You're-
version.
You're stepping into my fiefdom.
Say again.
You're stepping into my fiefdom.
There is a nastier version than that, but it's close enough.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm on Zoom, so you know.
Yeah, well, Kevin and I get kind of rank occasionally, but he's correct. He's correct. It's politics. And we have asked for a basis for it. Why are you proposing to do this? And no one on the committee, and by the way, the people on the concurrent committee are the director for the Delta Division, David Norris, the vice director for the Northwest Division, Mark Tharp, the vice director for West Gulf, Lee Cooper, the director for the Atlantic Division, Tom Abernathy, the vice director for the Southeast Division, Jim Schilling, and the director for the Hudson Division, Rhea Jarman. None of us have been contacted to ask for input on that motion. It was just filed. His version is a polite version. Your question is valid. What the motion would do is leave the committee in existence, but let it sit there and do nothing but we would advise. The league has spent 20 years of permitting headquarters to have full control of where we go with regard to support for the clubs, areas, and NTS. How much support have you gotten out of that? How much support have you gotten out of that?
Yeah, nothing until recently.
Yeah. So if we go back to the past, and I will assure you that the conversation regarding this motion is going to be a lot harsher than I'm being in this meeting. But to have created it after all the work and input from the people we've gotten from the field and from inside the board, and now I'll use the words of a newly elected director. The newly elected director from another division called up and went, "Why are they doing this?" He said that motion guts the committee. He's dead right. It kills it. So if that happens, we're going to tell you, but I don't know if they've got enough votes to do it, but they are dead serious about doing it. And Kevin's version of internal politics, again, that's a polite version. Your question about the individual motivations, I have a pretty good idea why, but I'll be polite and not discuss them here. I'll talk to you later. But feel the politics is a good reason to do it. Yes.
Does money impact this decision at all? Would you save money or lose money, or is that even important?
The short answer is no. The committee is, the league exists with PSC, handles, like I said, the XCon testing, handles all of the ECs and everything related to that. You've got the A&F committee, administration and finance, who's supposed to oversee administration of the building and the employees and be responsible for overseeing the finances. The other committee that exists, who is executive committee. I'm a member of that committee. PSC and A&F are appointed by the president. The EC is elected by the board itself. The EC's authority is to deal with matters that come up between the board meetings. If it can be deferred to the board meetings, it gets deferred. If it has to be done right now, then the EC will deal with it. There are other committees that are what we call ancillary committees that are created to do just a particular research job or be responsible for a particular area. But the organizational structure that's filed with the state of Connecticut was PSC and A&F, but the EC-FSC committee becomes a third operational committee. And those are the committees through which the future is determined and the operations are run. So does it cost any more for the committee that exists or not? No, not really. You may spend a little money on meetings or something like that, but that's a rounding error.
Can I ask
the committee creates, and it will, like I said, we've got a 3 to 5 page list, depending on whether it's his list or somebody else's list in that committee. And again, those lists are compiled from conversations with clubs and with section managers and others. If those programs or if we create a program and we recommend it be adopted by the board or be implemented by headquarters, will that cost money? Sure. But progress always costs money, but there's no major cost tied to this committee.
Can I ask a related question?
Yes, sir.
There's been some turnover recently on the board with some interesting election results. Is that going to affect how this pans out?
If you're asking, will the election, back up, the directors, 5 directors out of the 15 stand for election every year. There were elections this year, 2 director positions changed. The New England division and the Roanoke division. Roanoke is basically Carolinas, call it that. It's a few more states. And New England sounds like we said, it's New Hampshire, Vermont, Massachusetts, Maine. Will those 2 new positions result in changing the outcome of how the vote goes? The answer is I don't know. Those 2 directors will have to make up their mind where they wish to stand on whether or not we go forward with increasing support for the clubs, section managers, NTS and areas, or they want to go back to the old method of we will show up and listen to what you tell us from headquarters.
The reason I ask is because Fred Hoppengart, I don't know how you pronounce his name. Yeah, you mentioned his name, but he was unelected this year and seemed to have some serious competition.
I'll come back to you. Let me answer your question.
Understood.
There were 3 people running out of the New England division. The former director, Tom Frenay, Fred Hopengarten, who defeated Tom Frenay in the last election, and Fred, and if I say his name correctly, Kimner. Did I say that right, Mary? What's the correct? Kimmerer. All 3 are good men. All 3 have different interests and strong passion. As I said, the investment management committee that's changing our investment policy as a result of Fred Hopengarten's recommendations. And Fred is also co-author of the HOA legislation that we'll talk about in a minute. New England made a change. The election was very close. I've spoken to the new Fred. I mean, when we talk about, we've got Fred 1, Fred 2. I've spoken to the new Fred. He's extremely enthusiastic. He's got a number of great ideas. He's very supportive of clubs, very supportive of emergency communications. Does that tell me or you how he's going to vote? No, he's got to make his own decision. But one of his strong election points was his efforts with bringing youth in the clubs, and he turned the Nashua Club in New Hampshire from just a little small group to, I think, what was it, 400? Huge increase in the club size. So I could speculate, but anytime you have an election change with new votes in the room, yes, you've got a possibility of the votes that previously existed to support the committee will shift. The gentleman who was elected out of the Roanoke division, Dr. Jim Boner, was the previous director. He was defeated by Bud Hipsley. And in this election, Dr. Boner's back. Dr. Boner's a good man. I don't know where he stands on this. I haven't had a chance to talk to him. But the question you asked is valid. We don't know. It will be an interesting discussion at the board meeting. And you had a question, sir.
Would 47%, get their attention?
Would the 47%, if the members were to say don't or do, it should. But the problem is when we don't have enough time to get the entire membership involved. If we did, we would. But yes, it would make a difference.
The whole thing that bothers me personally, and I just started working with ARRL 2 years ago because I didn't want anything. I did it because of emergency services, because that's my passion. Everything that I see in every newsletter, contest. I guess I don't even want to get on the radio on the weekends because of contest.
My smile is not because I disagree with you. The smile is because that was one of the motivating factors for creating a committee that would shift focus within the league. I love contesting. I mean, my station operates out of a truck, so DX to me is 3 blocks down the street sometimes. But as important as those are, that is part of the interest of amateur radio. We have people who'd rather do fox hunting. We have people focused on EME. We have people focused on DXing, contesting. But there are also, it's 48% of the people who get a new license get a license because they want to participate in emergency communications or public service. Think about that. 48% of people who go get a license want to help.
And I think that's bigger here in the central US. That number is probably a larger number.
Well, the central US, Mother Nature comes and visits every so often. In fact, if you look at the membership of the EC-FSC committee, the one that was created to actually bring into existence, those people are target divisions, with Delta and West Gulf being the 2 primaries. Pardon?
Flyover zone.
Pretty close, yeah. But if you're correct about what you would see in QST, Lee Cooper, who was South Texas section manager, I think, for 300 years. And other members of the committee have been arguing that we should create a section within QST that focuses on emergency communications, areas, NTS, racing, everything else. We have not been able to get there yet. I'm not going to tell you it's not going to happen, but that's been a concern that those who are interested in it don't have anything in the magazine they can look at. Nothing that keeps people up to date. We can do some of that through the section manager sending out newsletters. By the way, did you get an email from me? Have you seen these things? They're in text. 1980s text. We don't have a system that permits him or me or the other section managers or the directors to send an email that you normally get from whoever in the world that's an HTML email. We can't send attachments out to you. That's how far back we are on some of this. But that is one of the items that's listed on that long list of things to get done, is to try and provide either through a separate magazine or through a section within QST or a section within the magazine on the air, more information, more reporting on ARRLs, NTS, everything connected to it.
As you know, a couple of years ago, because of Mark, this club was a Ham-based club of the year.
Yes,
And one of the reasons was because of our focus on emergency service.
that's right.
I mean, that's, I was fortunate enough to be president that year, but that's not just me. It was a whole club is interested in taking care of the community. We do things like every week, we do siren checks, there's a lot of stuff that goes into that. But the ARRL doesn't seem to be supporting it.
It has not in the past. You were pointing someone, we'll get to, okay, but with Dave Sumner, the primary focus was on DX and contesting international matters, all of which were important, but support for the clubs and field service areas NTS dropped. We've been, after Dave left and we got new CEOs, we've been trying to refocus the league to do that. It's a major shift and change, but that's the reason this committee was created, because it's such a large part of the membership that has no interest in contesting, DX, fox hunting, anything else. It's public service and emergency communications. And again, that's a statutory reason to exist. If we don't pay attention to that, my concern, and there are others who may disagree with me who aren't in this room, why are we here? I mean, I'm chairman of the legislative committee. When we go to Congress, or we go to the Oklahoma legislature, we go to the Texas legislature, which is a hoot, by the way, you have people there, the majority of them, in fact, there's no one in Congress right now, I think, that holds a ham license. It used to be that when we would go talk to someone, I'd talk to Senator Mark here. Mark go, I'm not a ham, but my uncle, Mr. Jeans down the street. They all knew someone who was an amateur radio operator, and they had a favorable view of it. If they had been elected to county government, municipal government, they knew that when Mother Nature came to visit and things went south, the other people that came to visit with amateur radio to back them up when they needed it. And like people said about John Wayne, he shows up, solves a problem, when it's over, he goes home. That's what we did. Came up to help, then we went home. But that's been changing over time. I've seen it just in the last 10 years working with the legislature. You've got a shift in new members now. They don't have the same background because amateur radio has done a poor job. I've got stronger language than poor, but let's go with poor job of telling the world what we do.
You've got a good cross-representation of people here.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you ask the room what they feel about, what I just talked about? Want to take it to, take it to
Go.
board meetings?
All right,
Mark. Hands raised for emergency communication side. Ooh, good. Hands raised for contesting. Good. Yeah. And
Hands
you can raise your hand more than
support.
once.
Hands raised for support for the clubs.
I got
That
two.
got
up.
100%.
Yeah, I got them all up. Any others you need? No?
Yes, sir, in the back.
I've got a question about the support for the clubs. My league membership's expired, and I get these things in email all the time.
Did we tell you that you got into the room free, but you can't get out of the room free? We're gonna take your $49.
You're free computer direct or you're free whatever. But I've yet to get one that says, click here if you want to renew through your club and you want them to get credit for membership.
I didn't pay him. Really, I didn't.
I don't believe you.
Neither did I.
John,
You hit a nail on the head. If someone walks in this door, they're brand new, and the club signs them up, that's a $15 credit to the club.
If you do the paperwork,
We'll get to the paperwork. Hang on.
and it is paperwork.
But if anyone in the room renews, that's $2. The amount of paperwork that a club president has to do, or club treasurer has to do to get that $2 is staggering.
Yep.
What we have, that's only part of it. But what I've suggested at headquarters, we've discussed it, but it hasn't been implemented yet. The website, by the way, I think the official word is it sucks. It's very difficult to fix. But what we're intend to implement is that any one of you who wants to go online and renew online, when you get that chance, you can click, give this club credit. Now, the other thing that I suggested that was approved, if I remember correctly, is that $2 is a waste of time.
Yep.
In 1980, $2 was kind of neat. $2 will not buy you a cup of coffee now. So I've said we move it to $5. So if any one of you renew, the proposal on the floor is supposed to be the club gets $5 for that renewal if it comes to the club. Now, again, the paperwork hasn't changed. It hasn't been streamlined yet. It can be done. But what we're trying to do is get it so that you can just go online and go, I picked this club. And it's done. That makes it easier at headquarters. The bookkeeping up there is a pain too, by the way. Nothing works efficiently on this side, but the intent is what is, I've already proposed, what my understanding we've got approval on is that when we're able to fix the websites, it'll be easy to do it online. But it's supposed to, it hasn't been formally announced yet, but it's going to go to 5. 15 will still be the brand new person.
54 cents is a postage. So if you're sending one in, you make 54 cents for postage and you get $2 back for it. So
Go 54 for postage and you've got the cost of the envelope and you end up maybe getting $1. Yeah.
I think they'll
But-
let us scan now. It's
Yeah,
right.
but perfect question. And that's been an issue we're trying to address.
Money's in the mail, Dean.
John,
Yes, let me answer his question.
okay,
The website it's written on a very customized one-off
You
content
bet.
management system. When it was implemented, one back up, it's what the current board understands is that the original contract for it was on one sheet of paper, and it was a bid sheet. It had no deliverables, no requirements for this section of that. It's the reason it collapsed the first time it was opened up. The company that wrote it has abandoned the program.
Yeah.
Everything's hard coded, so it's difficult to modify anything. There
Yeah,
is,
it's
we've already
terrible.
had a discussion that we're going to rewrite, we're going to create a new website with a modern content management system. It's on the list of things to do. We first have to raise the funding to do that. We spent, if I remember correctly, the cost of the website with staff time and what we paid the group known as Fathom was about $750,000. It doesn't work. The search engine, that's supposed to work with it doesn't work. That's the reason the only way you can search for anything on that website is Google.
Yep.
Nothing that works, and it doesn't track everything correctly. The amount of information stored is staggering, but you can't find most of it.
Correct.
I mean, if you go and look just for the minutes of the board meeting, you'd think they'd show up in some kind of order. No.
No.
It's one of the things we have to fix.
good.
And it again, it's on a list of things to fix.
I mean, I'm not the only genius who noticed this.
You're probably the lead genius, but not the only one, no.
It was bad from the get-go. When they took a week to cut over and the web was completely unavailable, we knew right from then, this was back in 2010 or 2011, we knew right from then that this was going to be a let's just call it a fiasco. And it didn't disappoint. It's been a fiasco.
The fun part was that there's no real testing before they tried to switch over.
Clearly.
Now, if you look at that website and you look at a full page, if you look very carefully, the page is distorted. Because at the bottom of the page where you can't see it, hard coded into the page is the name of the company that created it. And no one thought to exclude that either. It was perfect advertising for them. So everything that was done by folks who were well-intentioned, but had no idea about software and how to do any of this.
And I have to say, guided by a board who was the same, right? I mean, there was nobody on the board at that time that had any clue.
That is partially fair the board relied on the people at headquarters, and it should have brought in experts to provide it with advice. The folks at headquarters did not understand what they were doing. There's been another software program, by the way, that we're having to deal with now that when the contract was executed, through a contract, it used conventional terms for that type of software contract. Nobody understood what it meant. The contract went over 3 times its deadline. We've spent another 1.5 years getting it fixed. But the people on the board, this again is one of the things we're trying to change. Is we want the expertise in the boardroom. We want to be able to examine what's going on and question it. And you've got some really good people on the board. You've got some people, like I said, who's trying to kill the committee, but the intent is when we look at these software programs and we're looking to hire new IT directors, that we want to get expertise other than what sits in that building 225 Main. Because they're not software experts. They're not development experts. But you saw the result, as you pointed out, about what happened with the website. By the way, how many of you use Logbook of the World? A few.
Absolutely.
Now, do you remember what was in November of 2011 when it crashed?
Oh, yeah. Don't get me started.
Well, I can go longer than you can because it got really intense when we found out. I was president of CTDX in Austin at the time. If you don't think the club wasn't unhappy about that, you just didn't attend that party. But this is a simplification of what was wrong. They're written within the code. It would hit a certain maximum point, and when it did, it couldn't go any further. It had a maximum number of QSOs. It's a little more complicated, but let's call it that. They went into a loop. The good news is we had to get an IT guy who figured out what it was, and we adjusted everything. But the way it processes information isn't efficient. Everything you see now is multi-threaded. Not this program. When it gets your information, it processes it through every award, through every possible application it could have. And when it's done, it starts over again with his. So we can't, the current, and there, by the way, there's a serious, intense disagreement. Dave Bernstein, who worked with us to fix Logbook of the World when it crashed, who did an excellent job, has one view
Who
of how it
quit
should
the
be fixed.
committee?
Sir?
Who quit the committee because the league redirected the resources they hired to fix it to do desktop support.
That's not exactly correct. It's partially correct, and I'll come back to that and clarify that. But there's a disagreement as to where the development process on Logbook World should go. And it resulted in a split between Dave and the people at headquarters. But Dave did excellent work when it was there. But what we learned when we looked at it, there was no documentation for the code. When Dave came in with help, they had to try and figure out what this program did. So they've gotten it to be stable. If we hadn't had Dave and there's some of the others, it wouldn't have been stable. But the program can't be what it needs to be to handle the increased volume. I think we have 148,000 accounts on it. So Dave's view is that we ought to incrementally change part of it. Another view is that we just write a new program, get it working, and then cut over. There are risks with that, but I'm not the software guy. The software experts we have will be working on it. And if any of you have been in some of the committee or club meetings I've had, the question is, how do you pay for it? If I start choking, it's okay. The estimated cost to fix the Logbook of the World before we get to the website is over $1 million. 18 months, 24 months, depending on whose view you look at. How do we fund it? No, I asked Mark and he said no. But my idea is I've gone to all the contests and DX clubs and go, okay, guys, we did this in Oklahoma. I think you were there. He
Yes.
said, okay, each year we operate this program. Some years we lose money on it. Some years we break even. I think the worst year is about $250,000 loss. It's a member benefit. It's not going to go anyway. But the question we've been asking all the contests and DX clubs If the choice is to improve the program, it has to be, it will not survive. And we don't have the money. If we come and ask you for a donation, will you donate money if that money is used only to fix that program? The answer has been 100% yes. So we can do it. I talked to Greg Wyden, who is former director, who's head of the Love Book of the World Committee. We're going to be talking about this at the board meeting. How do we implement a program to get started on defining the specifications for what the new program should do, what we want it to do, and then how do we put together the funding for it? So that is one of the programs that we're going to be working to get fixed. But it'll be going out. We're going out to the membership. Look, guys, help us out. Help us do it.
Can we specify where donations are to be used?
Yes. When this is announced, assuming that it's put together, like I said, Greg and I talked about 2 days ago, we put it together that this is the announced development plan. This is what we intend to do. And in order to do it, we want donations from the users, from anyone, in fact. Then that money will be segregated. If you want to make a donation, that money can go to Law Book of the World. It doesn't go anyplace else. It goes into an account for Law Book of the World. Won't get spent for anything. And that money will stay until we get the program finished. Now, with $37 million in investments or an endowment, more accurate, we could write a check right now to pay for it. What we believe is important, let's be fair. What I and some of the others working on this believe is important is that if we're going to do this, we need buy-in from the users and the members. You need to support what we're doing. You need to have a hand in this. So we're going to go back to membership to raise the money. If we run short, we can always go into the endowments to do it, but it'll get done. Sir.
Can I ask you in the weeds question on that? I'd written it down earlier. Is that $37 million? Is there a chunk of that, all of it, or a part of it, an escrow account where the board can only spend the interest that core amount earns, or is the whole thing up for use? The reason I ask that is Oklahoma, when they had sued the tobacco companies and put I think they call it the T-set or something. That core money cannot be touched. It's like a gazillion billion dollars. They can only spend the interest. We still have a pot full of money left. You couldn't spend it if you wanted to. A lot of the other states didn't endow that. They could spend any amount on anything and theirs is gone. And I was curious if the board escrowed any part of that $37 million, like 20 million is a core amount that cannot be spent, and then they just can spend the interest that earns, or is the whole thing in jeopardy?
It's an in the weeds question, and it's a good question. Of the 37 million, a portion of the money is restricted. How many of you are life members? I'm going to send you a bill for a second life membership so you live longer.
I hope I live long enough.
If you have a life membership, that money is segregated. We can only spend a certain amount of it over the life of the membership, and it's calculated 25 years. People have donated money, and that money, as it was donated, was restricted for certain uses. We can't spend the principal of that money either. So what can we spend? It's the interest off of that. But there's about 15 million that's unrestricted money, which means if we really all wanted to go to Friedrichshafen, we could spend the 15 money, go to Friedrichshafen. But of the 37 million, the way it is currently set up is that we are looking at not having to ever invade the corpus unless we have to. On any given operating year, as part of the budget, we allocate or we predict that we may have to use a certain portion of that money. I think the max we've had to use is 500,000. This year, it might be a lot bigger because of the decline in advertising, sales, and other things. But if we wanted to use it all, we can't get beyond 15 million. That's maxed out. We can't go beyond it. That's one reason we want to increase the earnings. I mean, up until the July meeting, the maximum amount of money could be invested in stocks was 50%. And if you talk to all the investment advisors, you go, what? It ought to be 65 to 70%. So the new investment policy actually permits us to do that. So we'll end up hiring people to take care of that. But no, that's a good question. But 15 million is a max that could be taken out. And there are little tricks with that, but majority of money is reserved. We can spend the interest off of it. But we have made a point of not invading that, either all of the interest we earn or all of the corpus, because we want to keep that for the future. We try not operate out of actual operational expenses.
An easy way would be to take a certain percentage of the money earned and create a rainy day account. In other words, that can only spend after the non-rainy day interest is earned and used. That would be like a stopgap.
Effectively, it's kind of set that way as it is. If we need the money, we have to have it. We've budgeted, I think in the past, it's been about 500,000 a year. But if we had to, we're in a position to go back and get more money out of that account. But we make a point of not doing that unless we have to. But no, that's a good question. Any other questions on that? On the website, that's the question again. We don't have the money allocated to fix it. It's going to take several $1 million to fix it. I'm not a software guy, you are, but he tells me that's not an unreasonable set of numbers to look at. We haven't started yet because we haven't worked out how we're going to fund it. But it has to get done. It's crippling to us. I mean, if you try to order something through the store, it gets interesting.
How's that ARRL forklift working? Yeah, that was
Haven't been in
prominently
the warehouse, so I can't tell you how it's working. They won't let me near it.
it was prominently mentioned one day on the website, and I thought, man, if they've got a forklift in 2022, they're doing it wrong.
Well, we have a warehouse.
I know.
Everything that's shipped out of headquarters goes through that warehouse.
I know. That's wrong.
Well, we have looked at fulfillment companies that if you run a large company with large shipments of products, you can pre-position the products, say at UPS or FedEx, and they will go in the cage, get it, package it, ship it out. We've looked at doing that with what we have to ship out. The numbers don't work for us. Our volume is not enough to justify the cost to do that.
Okay.
We wish, but no. In fact, that's been recommended several times, and each time it's been looked at, it just doesn't work. We're actually looking at perhaps purchasing our own warehouse. We lease this one. We're looking at purchasing it, but wow. Now, let me ask you a question. It's 10:34. We can keep talking for a long time. How far you want to go?
I'd probably entertain questions and see where we're needing to go.
Let me cover two things that are important. The $35 fee. How many of y'all paid it yet?
Not yet.
The $35 fee that was implemented by Congress, well, no, that's not fair. Congress passed what's known as the Ray Baum Act in 2018 that told the FCC to set the fees for licensing for everybody, not just amateur radio. The FCC proposed $50. We fought it. It's down to $35. They haven't implemented it. Part of the authorization for that says that you can't implement it until you do certain things with your database, because you've got to be able to let people online pay for it, and you've got to be able, when they pass an exam, to give them notice when they're supposed to pay their fee. The software doesn't exist yet. We talked to 4 days ago, talked to our general counsel, FCC counsel, to be more accurate, and there's no word out of the FCC when they're going to be able to do it. We thought they were going to implement it by February. Not going to happen. It will be at least 6 months, could be a year before that fee's ever implemented. And we're still arguing that they ought to go away. So we haven't given up on it. Let's talk about the HOA legislation for a second. How many of you know that we've been trying to get rid of private land use restrictions on amateur radio? 2014, a bill was filed that was called ARPA, Amateur Radio Parity Act. No, I didn't create that name. The bill was a PRB1 bill that mirrored the PRB1 language from the FCC And Oklahoma and Texas both have a PRB1 statute that says if you're a city or county, you have to reasonably accommodate amateur radio and must use the minimal restrictions to accomplish your goals. That bill unfortunately morphed in January 2016 into an entirely different bill. It was written by the HOAs. The people we had, our general counsel at the time, who's no longer with us, our lobbyist, and other people inside the boardroom who didn't have any background in legislation or law, sat down with the HOAs and went, what do y'all want? Well, I can tell you what the HOAs want. We fight them in Texas House all the time. They effectively wrote that bill. Had it passed as it was rewritten, you could have wiped out amateur radio throughout the country because you had never, ever gotten an antenna in.
We don't need in jail.
You'd be sharing my cell, by the way.
If you're in an HOA, if you're not in an HOA, it doesn't apply.
Here's a key catch of what they wrote. The bill said Congress is going to direct the FCC. These are the parameters. Those parameters were what the HOAs wanted. Okie dokie, it passes. You violate the HOA restriction that they were permitted to adopt. What did you really do? You violated an FCC regulation because they wrote the regulations to permit the HOAs to do this. It created the possibility, not guaranteed, but possibility that when your license came up for renewal and you had violated an HOA restriction, the HOA could file a complaint against your license being renewed. Far-fetched? You don't know HOAs. They're vicious. But the bill was so bad that those of us who had dealt with this tried to argue that we should stop and start over again and fix it. No one would listen. So in January of 19, we managed to shift 4 positions on the board. David Woolweaver stepped down as director. I became director. I think the first thing we did was fire the general counsel. Then we fired the lobbyist, and then we withdrew the bill. We've now rewritten that legislation. We've been looking for sponsors since then. We've got a number of congressmen and senators who have indicated they will support the bill. We hope to be able to get the bill filed within, well, we're planning on by this week, but we're just the administrative side of getting this done at Congress is fun. If we stay on time by February, we hope to have the bill filed. If you ask what's in the bill, we haven't disclosed it. The decision was made by the board, let me think, 2 years ago, that the board has seen the language, we're not going to disclose it because we don't want the HOAs to know what we're going to put on the table once it's there. But if the bill were to pass as we drafted it, you get to put up exterior antennas, wires, verticals, and towers.
It doesn't have to be a flagpole.
Actually, one of the provisions permits flagpoles, yes.
Permits, but that's in addition to.
It's in addition to. What the bill will do is it does not permit the HOAs to define what you put up. And trust me, they're going to fight hammer and claw, tooth and nail over that one. Yes, sir.
Do you have any idea how many hammer operators there are on the Hill?
There. Now, what's interesting is when you call a congressman or a senator, rarely do you ever get to talk to them. You talk to the staff, chief of staff, legislative director, whatever. We've had at least 2, maybe 3 legislative directors ask us, how do they get their ham license? They're not the congressman, not the senator, but staff is looking at doing this. And you have a number of staff members that are extremely supportive of amateur radio. And that's very important. But no one elected that we know of.
If only there was a book that would help them get through that,
If there only was a book, yes.
or videos.
It's out
By
of
the
print,
way,
Mark.
I brought to him to distribute to not only this club, but other clubs, a bunch of technicians manuals to help you all get some more members. So that is something to look forward to. When that happens, you will see a major campaign like the last time coming back to the members to ask you for help. Because if I go to Senator Mark and go, I want you to support the bill, what Senator Mark wants to know, since he's from Oklahoma, is how many people in Oklahoma really want me to pass this? Because if there's not anybody from Oklahoma who wants him to pass it, he's not going to do it. Two things get people elected. One is votes, second is money. So if there's no possible voter support in the state where he was elected, he's not going to do it, folks. So if you think your contact is not important, let me tell you it is. If you call your congressman, your senator, even if you call your state rep or state senator, they log those calls. Who are you? Are you in my district? They'll talk to you if you're not. What's the issue you're calling on? Because that tells them that there's constituent support or opposition to this. If the entire state says, I don't want this, like we just voted a while ago about, do we support the EC-FSC? Okay, they're not going to do it. If the entire state says do it, they probably will. So we'll be asking you to make phone calls and send emails. 10 years ago, it'd be send a fax because they didn't read emails. Now they don't read faxes, they read emails. Can you mail a letter? Sure you can. It goes to a postal facility, stays there for 6 weeks before it ever gets sent to them because they're concerned about anthrax and everything else. So it'll be an email campaign and a telephone campaign. And they will pay attention to it. Sir.
A while back, not the last couple of years, but I had a senator's office tell me that every handwritten letter that they get, not, typed, but a handwritten letter they get counts for 2,800 votes.
That's an interesting comment. The only reason we're talking about we'll be doing phone calls and emails is we've got a 6-week delay. It doesn't mean you can't send a letter. You can actually send a fax, but they have said, telling us they're paying attention to the email. But if he's correct, if you send a letter, it just won't show up for about 6 weeks because they run them through the processing facility. They actually think we don't like congressmen. Yes.
Each bill has to have a sponsor. How do you figure out who you go to try and sponsor the bill?
You go up to a door and, Congressman, here's who we're with. Here's what we'd like for you to do.
There's no congressmen or senators, other hands?
None, zero.
Not anymore.
No, we had one. I think he's retired now. Doesn't mean they're hostile to us. They just don't know. They may have some knowledge of amateur radio. They want to know, again, do my constituents support it? Who are the people who are opposing it? What consequences will there be? And the HOAs are well organized. They have multiple lobbyists, not one. We've got one. They have multiple. And the people they hire are good. They're really good at what they do. And what they will do is go tell Senator Mark over here, if you pass this bill, we're going to put 5,000 people on your doorstep. And they will have people write letters. They will have people make phone calls, just like we're doing. They'll try and bury him with, quote, constituent opposition. Comes down to who puts the most pressure on, who's most convincing. We've got a really good argument for what we're doing. Anyone have a satellite dish on their house? Okay. Prior to 96, you were criminals because the HOAs prohibited it, satellite dishes. They also prohibited TV antennas. They also prohibited any type of antenna for wireless broadband. Well, it's a national prerogative or plan now that we're going to have national broadband or broadband everywhere. So much heat was brought to Congress because people couldn't put up a TV antenna. I'll put up a satellite dish or an antenna for internet. Congress in 1996 amended the Communications Act. As part of that, they adopted what were called the Otard Rules, over-the-air reception device. The bill said, FCC, fix this, and here's what you're going to fix. Short version is, if you have a satellite dish, it's because of the Otard Rules. If you want to put up an exterior antenna for TV, you may. What do you put it on? You can put it on a mast, you can put it on a tower. If you want an antenna for internet, what are you going to put it on? Mast, tower. If you want to have satellite dish, tower for TV antenna, anything else, you don't have to ask the HOA for permission. The Otard rules took away from the HOAs the ability to require you to get permission. And if you have a fight with them about that satellite dish, you have the right to have the FCC hear it. Not a local court, not their board of directors. It goes to the FCC. By the way, the FCC, so far as we know, has crushed every HOA that's come to it. But those rules were done to fix exterior antennas for everything else but amateur radio. If what we're told is true, folks at the ARRL were told that they should get involved in the Otard rules and see to it amateur radio was included, and they ignored it. That's what we're told. We weren't there, but it's what we're told. But we now have to go back and fix it. So you can put up a Roan 25 in your backyard if you can meet the qualifications on the Otard and put a TV antenna on it. No one can say anything. No one's the HOA can. But if you put up the same tower and stick, instead of a channel master, you stick an M2 on it, you're in violation of HOA rules. It makes no sense, folks. In fact, that's one of the arguments we're making with the legislature. That, okay, if I can put this stuff up, tell me the difference. They can't. Sir? Actually, I've been trying to find a case. As you know, I'm trying to find a HOA where we can put up one with a TV antenna and hang a Yagi below it and go, what are you going to do now? It makes no sense. I haven't been able to find one. And to give you an extreme example, there's a subdivision outside Fredericksburg, Texas, about 10-acre lots, something like this. It's 10 to 50. As you drive in, there's a 105-foot tower in front of you. Roan 25. Sitting on top of it is a TV antenna. Because there's a ridge line, they have to get over the ridge line to get to San Antonio. 400, 500, 600 yards this way. There's a 101-foot tower, a 100-foot tower. It's got 110 on the other one, I think. They're Roan 25s. The difference is those are amateur radio antennas sitting on top. That HOA tried to make him take down those towers and antennas. He'd been there for 10 years with it. Somebody moved in that just hates, well, actually hated him. And they tried to get the HOA to make him take them down until we showed up and went pick a courthouse. Because if you try to make them take them down, we're going there. They backed off. But the point is, a 105-foot tower that way is perfectly legal under Otard rules. Amateur radio, identical to it, is not. That's insane. So that's where we, sir?
Totally.
Anything else you want to cover? What we want to do is open this up to questions, because I know he can talk forever, but so can I, because there's so much going on and there's enough passion to back it up. So ask questions. What do y'all want to hear? What do you want us to do that we're not doing? Other than get rid of him.
Hank?
Hank? Yes, sir.
I'm a member of HOA, and one of the reasons, the HOA gets antennas because they believe, and I agree, that it could affect the value of your house. Let's say that you had a $400,000 house, $200,000 house, and somebody next door can put up an antenna, TV or otherwise. And you have a buyer that comes by there. I know I personally would not want to buy a house next to a 105-foot tower, because it distracts from the aesthetics of the neighborhood. They sound persnickety or whatever you want to call it. But when you're talking about dollars and cents about how to resell your house, you get really concerned more than your ham radio benefit. So I would not be for the provision to allow antennas of any size higher than your house in the backyard.
That's a reasonable position for you to take because you believe that. Here's what's interesting. When we introduced legislation in Texas, that was the argument that was made. It will destroy the value of the homes in this subdivision. Well, aesthetics was a separate argument. And aesthetics translates this, it's ugly. That's the way the HOA is running. We brought in the lead tax appraiser for Harris County. I mean, Houston kind of occupies as much space as some states. He came in and said, when we evaluate the values for houses, we do not take into account the existence of the antennas, TV, satellite, amateur, because it has no effect on the value of the homes. Well, hang on, let me finish, because this is testimony into the legislature. What we established through sales records, we just picked a subdivision, and we went through year by year for the homes that were sold. Next to fill in the blank, TV antennas, amateur. We targeted amateur for obvious reason. The home values did not decrease. They kept increasing along with the rest of the neighborhood. So he's got a house, he's got an amateur antenna, and he's got the house next door. He's got the one across the street. No effect on the market value. They keep going up. If the market value is going to go down, it's going down because of outside factors. I understand your concern, and there are people who would not move in next to him because they don't like the tower or the antenna. I mean, it could be a hex beam sitting on top of a roof. It could be a flagpole. There are people who will not. You are correct. There are people who won't buy that house. But is it universal? Respectfully, no, it's not. Can you, by market value, show that it has an impact? No, you can't. We've done it too many times.
I would buy it and they say, right, save my life.
I would just say, it depends on the neighborhood. If you're in a top level, let's say you've got $500,000 house or whatever. Or say you've got one neighbor that moves in and decides to stick it up there. You probably get everybody in an HOA, and you can argue or not, but in my HOA, hell, the guy tried to put power, what do you call it?
Solar panels?
Solar panels on the backside of the HOA moved against it because it would screw up the value that everybody voted for.
Tell them to call me. I'll sue them, because here's what's happened. We put a bill in. I can't speak for Oklahoma because I don't know where the solar legislation is. In Texas, because we want, in a part of amateur radio bills, electricity goes out, you got to have power somewhere. Our argument was we should be able to put in outside generators, and I don't mean the little ones at Home Depot. I'm talking about the ones the size of this table, and solar. The HOAs made the same argument. They're ugly. Now, the better argument they made, the one that we loved when we were at the legislature. Yeah, but here's what we did. Their best argument, by the way, was that solar panels were noisy. I'm not kidding you. They made it. It's in a committee hearing.
They kill birds too?
Well, they said it would blind Miss Wilkins across the street with the sun shining on the solar panels. California, Florida, keep going down the list of states. If you build a state building, county building, city building, you will put solar on the building or you're not going to get permits. Now, they have also mandated that for all homes built after a certain date, again, particularly Florida and California, that you will put solar on the houses. You don't get an option as a builder, you put it on there. Now, will that detract from the value of the home? We're skipping aesthetics for a moment. Would I want to live next to a house with solar panels? Wouldn't bother me a bit. But somebody else might not like them because they don't like the way they look. Again, you know, it's an eye of the beholder. But the bill we passed in Texas said, we don't care what regulation you as an HOA put on the solar panels. You can say that they have to be below the ridge line of the roof. They have to be parallel to the roof. The metal surrounding the panels has to be of a certain color. But here's the kill shot. Yeah. The bill passed in 2013, I think. So before then, you're correct. They could prohibit them, and they did. Someone missed it. The lawyer, the advising homeowner missed it, because here's the key to solar panels in Texas. And I think this is similar to California. I know because we modeled on California. You can put any regulation on the solar panels that you want, except You cannot regulate the location such that it will reduce the efficiency by more than 10%. Now, if the solar panel isn't facing south, it drops 10% the moment you move it. So we wrote that into the bill and said, we don't care what else you do, because it killed any attempt they did to try and fix it. So it's solar panels, religious symbols on doors, whatever. Again, it's HOA's proposal. And I'm sorry, I keep talking. I'll come to you in a second. You weren't through yet, sir. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I got another question, has nothing to do with that. Has to do with contest.
Yes.
Is there any way, I've asked ARRL to do this in the past and just kind of get it. Is there any way that during contesting, they can limit some of the frequencies that you can, on the weekends, you can at least communicate and allocate maybe like 7.1 or 7.2 contest on the 7.2, 7.3 for non-contesting?
It has been proposed. If it's a local contest, a statewide, I'm sorry, a US contest, okay, you pass the rule. What do you do about the foreigners? That's our problem. People who are not in the United States, people calling from DX locations, can't fix it. They've been suggested, and it's been looked at by every DX and contest group we've got. They've consulted with people overseas, and there's no way we control it.
ARRL could do it and say you're not going to get contest credit if it's outside.
That has been discussed, but it's never come up through PSC. And hang on.
It ruins the whole thing.
You're not the first one to bring that point up. My suggestion is put it in writing and send it. If you'll copy me, I'll see to it goes to Mike Ritz at PSC. It's been considered, but it's been turned down so far. Yes, sir.
How many ARRL sponsored contests are there a year?
What? Something like that.
10. So you want to limit frequency for 10 weekends a year?
Yeah. His complaint has some validity because in a contest weekend, the bands are gone. The bands at least you can contest on. But
10 weekends.
well, no, I don't disagree.
I can show you the list.
But the practical problem is how do we enforce it as the league? His suggestion is we don't give you contest credit. If we're the organization giving contest credit, okay, we can do that. If it's a CQ contest, no chance. If it's a contest being run overseas from another group, we can't. But again, it's been brought up. There's nothing wrong with bringing it up again. It's a valid question. But if you send me an email, I'll get you in touch with Mike Ritz with PSC and see if they'll bring it up. Okay.
If you were to limit the band spectrum, what would happen to somebody who contacted somebody that was outside of that spectrum, that say from overseas? What would they do about it? What would you do about it?
You can't stop them from doing it.
There you go.
Yeah, that's tradition.
And you also, work bans are usually,
Yeah, the work bands are excluded. Yes, sir.
One of the things that I just heard 2 days ago, Governor Newsom in California is projected a bill for 2024 that would outlaw all, engines like for lawnmowers, generators, things like that, that they cannot be used. So, it's going to make not only HOAs, but a lot of things, have to go completely different. People are going to talk about, they can't have a generator, so they're going to put up a windmill.
You could. Actually, in Texas, I think Eddie Manley tried to get it introduced here. He couldn't get a sponsor. We put a bill in that said that an HOA cannot prohibit an exterior standby electric generator. They can be from 2 kilowatts to 30 kilowatts, doesn't matter. They fought us, even though we said, look, these things don't run but once every 2 weeks for 15 minutes. And when they do run for real, nothing else is running in the neighborhood. And they're quieter than an air conditioning compressor, by the way, we proved it. They still fought them because they were noisy, and the legislature went, you people are dumber than used dirt. Because when the power goes out, we want power in those neighborhoods. So the bill passed, but I don't know if we got a sponsor to bring it in here in Oklahoma, but the California bill is really. And if it passed, it kills all of us. Right. Yes, sir. We had another question somewhere? Any more questions here or online? Yes, sir, in the back.
I had a question about those Otard regulations and privileges.
Yes, sir.
Do they just apply to HOAs, or are they city, county ordinance, CCR?
The Otard rules override everybody. It's federal law. Yeah, so if you looked at HOA documents, a lot of them still contain provisions that say that you may not put up satellite dishes. Doesn't matter. They can't enforce it. If they try, they can be hauled into court in a heartbeat. There's a federal bill called the 2005 Right to Display an American Flag Act. Again, because HOAs would say that you couldn't have a flag in your yard. Congress got tired of that. And they passed the 2005 Act. It says no city, no county, no homeowners association, no condominium may interfere with the right to display the American flag. How do you display the American flag? Bingo. It's got to be on a.
That's why there's companies out there that have flagpoles.
Yeah.
Amateur radio.
Yeah. And we've had that discussion with HOAs before. You know, we got a flagpole bill passed in Texas, by the way, and I think Katie tried to get one passed here. You don't need a local bill. The federal bill overrides everything on HOAs. So if you are in an HOA and you want to put up a flagpole, you get to put up a flagpole, or they end up in court and they lose. If you put up a flagpole, it can be an antenna. It took them the longest to figure that out, by the way. But yes. We actually made that proposal in one meeting, and everyone had a heart attack over that one, but no, it's going to have to look like a flagpole. Yes, sir. Any more questions?
Let's go one more, and then let's hold. He'll be around here afterwards, and go ahead and hit Mike.
Okay, John?
Yes,
I
sir.
heard you speak a couple of years ago on Spectrum Defense and artwork. I was wondering, where is Spectrum Defense on your things to do list?
It's at the top of the list. We have a lot of things at the top of the list, but one of the reasons that the ARRL exists, or ought to exist, is to protect what I call the gold in the bank, which are the frequencies assigned to it. The Congress has been, as part of a long-running program, ordering the FCC to start selling off frequencies. That's the reason we're fighting with them with 3.3 to 3.5. The first round they did to sell out for 5G, we were secondary to the military, and they took us off secondary. We're still arguing with them to fix that. There's a bill called HR 5378 filed by a gentleman out of Pennsylvania. It proposes to sell another block of frequency. We've caught that one. We're in the committee hearing, and we're arguing as part of the bill that comes out is that they're going to sell it. We're not going to stop that. But we're arguing that they will order the FCC to leave us as secondary. So this gentleman has a cell phone company. It covers all of Western Oklahoma. Those frequencies aren't being used in Eastern Oklahoma. Okay, why can't we keep using them as amateur radio because we're not interfering? What we're asking for is that to the extent that those frequencies are not being used, they won't be used for 2 to 3 years once they're sold. And to the extent that we do not interfere, because on secondary basis, the rules on us are we can use it unless we interfere. If we interfere, we have to stop. We want the same rules for 5G because there are large portions of the country where these frequencies are never going to be used, or they'll be so sparse. Unless you have 25,000 watts, you can't interfere with the thing. So we've refocused going to Congress rather than going just to the FCC. So we're trying to get the bill passed. It is a constant problem we have because people are always asking for standby temporary authorization to use part of our bands for this or that. So our FCC counsel, David Siddall, is watching this every day of the week. It will never stop, by the way. They're never, ever going to stop trying to give away the frequencies.
We got one off the online, which was a good question for Paul Teal. Top 3 or 4 things the league should or will be hitting during 2022.
Everything I discussed.
Everything he discussed. Okay. Yeah. It's all important.
We don't have the luxury. We should not have the luxury. The league doesn't. If it wishes to represent everyone in this room, if it wishes to address all the possible things we can do that benefit all our members, are the threats. We can't really put anything on a back burner. Obviously, something will get a little bit more focused on any given day, but everything we've discussed is that important.
With that, I'm going to say, pull the plug and say John and Mary will be here for a while. And you can grab them afterwards. Otherwise, N5AUS, look him up. You'll be able to see him. Appreciate your time, sir.
Thanks, John.
N5AUS at N5AUS.com works. So if you've got a question, complaint, send the complaint to him. But if you've got a question, contact me. I mean, that's the reason we're here.
I get
And
paid
if
more
you
for the
send that
company.
email, I'll get you Mike Rich's address. Mike is currently chairman of PSC. After January, it may shift, but again, it goes to PSC. It's a valid complaint. Thank all of you. Appreciate you putting up with me. Every court reporter does that too.
Make sure you're on. Okay, you're on.